When was the last time you waited through the night? Maybe it was because you were so excited that you couldn't sleep. That's the best kind of waiting to keep you up all night. The night before a big trip, the night before a big celebration, or even the night before Christmas. That kind of waiting is almost certain to lead to the very thing that is so joyously anticipated. But there are other times when waiting through the night is a frightening experience that shakes us to the core. Your very responsible teenage daughter missed her curfew. That's never happened before. You wait an hour or so, and then you start calling her friends, and none of them has heard from her since the late afternoon. 3 hours go by, and you call the local police department to file a missing persons report, and the police promise to do what they can. And then you wait several hours more. You pray like you've never prayed before. There is no way that you are going to get any sleep that night. You wait for a phone call that you believe is coming. And how you hope that when the phone does ring, it will be the voice of your daughter telling you that she's okay. And you dread the thought that the voice on the other end might be the police or the hospital trying to notify the next of kin. Those kinds of nights and that kind of waiting is horrible. Or maybe you're gathered with your family in a hospital waiting room while a loved one undergoes emergency surgery all through the night. Or maybe you wait through the night because you've made a terrible mistake and you anticipate that there will be a reckoning in the morning. You have no idea how you're going to face family and friends when they learn what you've done. Whatever the reason, there are times when waiting through the night is the hardest kind of waiting there is. In today's biblical story, King Darius waits anxiously through the night, desperately hoping that Daniel will be able to survive the lion's den unharmed. The king had been manipulated into making an irrevocable law that essentially put Daniel into the den of lions, and now he has no choice but to wait desperately through the night. How did Daniel end up in the lion's den? Well, it was mostly politics, if you want to know the truth. It was because of palace intrigue, as officers and chief administrators in King Darius's administration sought to undercut and outmaneuver each other. Daniel's rivals couldn't find any fault with his administrative skills, so they tried to brand him as a religious heretic and traitor. They took a picture with their smartphones of Daniel praying to God in the open window, and that was enough to get Daniel sent to the lions. King Darius was hoping for evidence to come to light that the incriminating photo had been photoshopped, but alas, the evidence was only all too real. Daniel had in fact been praying in the open window, in open defiance of the edict that the other officers and administrators had manipulated the king into signing. Once the king found out that Daniel survived the night in the lion's den, he had the officers who had accused Daniel, along with their families, thrown into the very same lion's den, and before they even hit the ground, the lions devoured them. That's in verse 24. I stopped reading at verse 23 because I really don't like that part of the story. I mean, why did the officers' family members, including children, have to be killed? It's a brutal world in that 6th chapter of Daniel. It's make sure your enemies get thrown to the lions or risk getting thrown to the lions yourselves. And in our highly polarized society, sometimes our present-day politics doesn't feel much different. How can we resist the lions without becoming a devouring lion ourselves? We might begin by remembering that the image of starving lions devouring their victims is not the only biblical image of lions. There's also the image of the lion lying down with the lamb in Isaiah 11. Isaiah actually pairs up the wolves and the lambs, while the lions are paired up with young calves. But in those remarkable images, all of the predators are at peace with their prey, and a small child plays safely with venomous snakes. Waiting for that image to be fulfilled is an entirely different kind of waiting. It's a deeper waiting. It is waiting for something that we have never experienced but can only dream about. I often think of the first part of Psalm 130. My soul waits for the Lord more than the night watchman waits for the morning. Yes, more than the night watch waits for morning. Waiting for the Lord is a deeper kind of waiting. It's a more than kind of waiting. It's waiting for a wholly new and unexpected world in which the lions do not devour those thrown into the pit, but frolic with the lambs instead. John Van Arsdal was a beloved Lutheran preacher who died 4 years ago of COVID at the age of 95. In one of his sermons, he explored what it meant to wait for the Lord. He said it was like waiting for something large enough to reshape the whole of our lives, something large enough to gather us up and all those around us, to turn us in a common direction and make us friends. Isn't that remarkable? In our deeply divided society, in our anxious communities, in our society still plagued by racism, can you imagine what it would be like to wait for something large enough to turn us in a common direction and make us friends? Truly, that is something that would be worth waiting for. The German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer was arrested in 1942 because he was part of the resistance against Adolf Hitler, and he spent the rest of the war in prison, awaiting execution, which finally happened on April 9th, 1945, just days before his camp was liberated by the Allies. He once wrote these powerful words from prison: "Not all can wait, certainly not those who are satisfied, contented, and feel that they live in the best of all possible worlds. Those who learn to wait are uneasy about their way of life, yet have seen a vision of greatness in the world of the future and are patiently expecting its fulfillment. The celebration of Advent is possible only to those who are troubled in soul, who know themselves to be poor and imperfect, and who look forward to something greater to come." In another place, Bonhoeffer compared Advent waiting to waiting in a prison cell, where one knows that deliverance can only come when someone on the outside with the key opens the door. For the Christian, Advent is the realization that it is Christ who unlocks the door from the outside. During Advent, we wait for the one who can finally deliver us. At the same time, our waiting is not passive. It is an active spiritual discipline of constantly looking for the new thing that God is doing and actively reorienting our lives according to the values of the new realm that God is ushering in. We wait for the Lord whose love never ends. We begin to live our lives as though we have already been gathered up by something large enough to turn us in a common direction and make us friends. It's not an easy kind of waiting, but Advent is a time for practicing this kind of waiting, a time not just for counting the remaining number of days on an Advent calendar, but for learning how to ground ourselves in prayer, even as the fierce, hungry lions surround us. Together as a church, we learn how to wait. We wait for that long arc of justice, which is beyond the brief time span of our usual political cycles. We wait for that complete reorientation that doesn't happen quickly. In the words of John Van Arsdal, We wait for the Lord who in a great parabola of grace enters the atmosphere of time and space and brings with him all who wait and desire to live in the light and to sing the songs of freedom. Truly, truly, my soul waits for the Lord more than the night watch waits for morning. Yes, even more than the night watch waits for morning. All glory and praise be to our God. Amen.